Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This podcast is sponsored by McConnell Music Therapy Services, Inc., where they believe in the power of music to transform people and communities. Based in Northern California, their board-certified music therapists support people of all ages and abilities within hospitals, schools, corporations, and communities using music experience to connect, express, and de-stress. Visit them at mcconnellmts.com or their Facebook page, McConnell Music Therapy. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is also sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's so great to be with you. I'm so glad you're here. And I just got to start out with a big, giant, heartfelt thank you. Thank you to everybody who's left a review, especially Reggie WK, who left a review titled The Comforting Place. Reggie writes, Tim's voice is calming and relaxing. This is the podcast I turn to when everything else feels like too much to handle. This podcast is the cure for feeling overwhelmed. Thanks, Reggie. I'm so glad you have somewhere to turn when things become too intense. And I have to be honest, I really appreciate that, because when I created this podcast, it was inspired by a different podcast that has music on it. And there's no talking on that podcast at all. And so I was really concerned about the amount of my voice that I thought you all had to endure in order to get to the music. And I've heard repeatedly from people about the fact that it's my voice as much as the music that's been calming for people. And I really appreciate that. And I think this is one of those great reminders, because I was comparing me to this other podcast, right? And how often do we do that, right? As a barometer for what we're supposed to do, we compare to something else. And I think it's a great reminder that my blank, right? My this, fill in the blank. So my this doesn't have to match his, hers, or their that, right? My blank doesn't have to match their blank. But how often do we do that in this hyper media, social media world that we live in? We just compare. Oh, I got to look like this. I got to post this number of times a day. I got a blank. I got to do this. I got to do that because, this person does it. Compare leads to despair are the words my vocal coach, Gina Rose, said to me one day. And I just laughed. Compare leads to despair. 4 words. And I thought, yeah, those are words to live by. So thank you, Reggie, for, commenting on my voice. It makes me feel more comfortable with the the prelude of this podcast every week, and that you're getting something out of just hearing my voice as well as hearing my music. All right. So this week, I'm going to share another interview from our Stress Elimination Summit. Because if you're listening to a podcast called Reduce Your Stress, chances are the content shared at the summit is tailor-made for you. So today you're going to hear me interview Jody Bilstrom. And Jody is a behavioral health therapist. And she has like a real specialty in connecting the dots between what happened to us as kids and what's happening to us as adults. And a lot of us don't realize there's this diagnostic tool that was created called the Adverse Childhood Event Survey, or ACES. And it is a predictor, a very valid, scientifically replicated, validated, tested, evidence-based tool to help us understand that the things we went through in childhood can absolutely impact us as adults in physical ways, in ways that I'm sure you did not connect the dots, because I know I didn't until I first learned about this survey. It's fascinating. So you're going to want to pay attention to this interview, because it may explain challenges that either you or a loved one are facing in a way you never considered. So sit back, enjoy the insights, and I'll see you on the other side. Jody Bilstrom, LCSW, is a behavioral health therapist with many years of experience providing long-term and short-term therapy for children, adolescents, and adults dealing with psychiatric issues, as well as those struggling with complex chronic medical issues and childhood trauma. Jody has earned her bachelor's of social work degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with a master in social work. So Jody, welcome to the summit.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
So great to be with you. So excited. And before we begin, what was your favorite concert?
Okay, so I had to think long and hard about this because my husband and I, who you're talking to tomorrow, actually came up with the same concert. So I had to go back, and we've been together 35 years. So this took a little time. But to make a long story very short, my favorite concert was in New Orleans over 25 years ago now. And we went and listened to a guitarist by the name of Sonny Landreth.
Okay.
Amazing. Guy from Louisiana. We were at a meeting down in New Orleans, went into a record shop, those things of the past. And the guy working there, we asked if there was some good music we especially needed to see that night. He mentioned, oh, you can't miss this concert. We go to this old, worn-out warehouse area of New Orleans. I'm scared to death. It was a whole evening. It just was fantastic. We walk into this old warehouse, and this guy starts playing, and he is amazing. And we had so much fun. We danced all night, and it was such a great memory because mainly we weren't anticipating it being that wonderful. I mean, not that he wouldn't be good, but it was so amazing. He is an incredible guitarist.
That is awesome. Did you say Sonny Landreth?
Sonny Landreth.
Okay. So I'm going to have to look him up, of course. So I appreciate that. That's how we all find out about good music, is just asking, like, hey,
Yes.
got any good music you know about? I don't. And I too have had some magical New Orleans live music, like discovery nights where you're like,
Yeah.
How does the world not know about you? There are so many amazing musicians in Louisiana, in New Orleans, like you trip over them as you're walking down the street. So
Absolutely. And especially walking into this, I was scared. I'm like, hope we aren't mugged, hope we can get into this thing. And it opens up and there he is. And
amazing.
Magical. Amazing.
So we are definitely kindred spirits in our commitment to who we serve and why we serve them. And I always find that it's not like, oh, I wanted to study economics or communication or English. It's like there's something personal to how I find myself hanging out with cool people like you professionally. And so I'm curious for you, what got you so passionate about who you serve and like why?
Well, it really comes close to home, as so many things do in my life. My personal journey to becoming a social worker, a psychotherapist, started with my dad. He struggled with anxiety and depression on and off throughout my childhood. And he met a wonderful man when I was a teenager who became his therapist. And mind you, my dad had several psychiatric admissions, really struggled with being able to hold it together. He wanted to be a father. He never intended for life to be like this. However, it took over. And I was one of 4 children, and we all became involved in this struggle. It affected all of us, but I really loved this therapist that he found, to the point that I did my first internship in undergrad with this man and the company he was with, to learn. The light bulb went on. It was like, that's what I want to do. I need to reach out and help other people. I know the struggle. I I know what it's like to feel helpless and not be able to give your father, what he needs, and what we needed as children. And so it really started there.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I appreciate you being vulnerable to share a personal story about your own family. And I think it's important. It humanizes, mental health issues for all of us. Like so many of us have dealt with them in our own families and grew up in a culture that was like, shh, we don't want to talk about that. So I think it's really courageous, and it's important for us to just come out and talk about these families of origin stories, because then people are like, wait, me too. And, oh, there's help. Okay. Thank you.
Right. It does normalize it. And this was back in the, mid 70s. I'm dating myself now, but this is back in the mid 70s when it surely was not being discussed.
Yeah.
And so it took great courage for him even to admit how difficult this was and to reach out to someone.
Totally. Yeah, that's really great, especially for the stigma for men and mental health on top of it. Like, we don't talk about our feelings. We're bred to be stoic and strong, and that's not our issue, So that was really courageous of him as well. You and I got talking about this. I don't know if the right word is diagnostic tool, but I want, one of the reasons we're talking today is I wanted to have you talk about the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey, or ACES, because I remember exactly where I was at the mental health conference I was speaking at when the keynote threw that slide up and talked about it for the very first time. And my world went boop, because suddenly here was this really reliable, like scientifically reliable tool to predict challenges later down the line in people's lives based on what happened out of the gate early on, and really putting two and two together in a very evidence-based way. And so can you talk to us and educate the listeners today? What is the ACEs? Like, I know we could spend 3 hours going into this, so it'll be just, it'll be really quick, but like we're just getting a surface view of the 10 questions, what are they? And then, let's start there.
I can definitely speak to that, and I will. I'm going to go through the 10 real quickly
Cool.
that I use on my survey for, so everyone gets a feel for what I am actually looking for, because sometimes we can use the buzzwords and people don't know exactly what we're asking for. So adverse childhood events, ACEs, that is the acronym. These are events that occur in a young person's life that have a serious negative impact on their health as years go by. And it's so important to know if these events have occurred, thus we want to screen for them. So this screening tool is made up of these events, and I'm going to go down the list. The first one is physical abuse. So the question is, did a parent or other adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid you might be physically hurt? These are yes or no questions. Secondly, emotional abuse. Did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, or throw things at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or injuries? Third, sexual abuse. Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older that lived in your home ever touch or fondle you, or have you touched them in a sexual way, or attempt or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Yeah. Number 4, emotional neglect. Did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were special or important, or that your family didn't look out for each other? Number 5, physical neglect. Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or that your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you? Number 6, parents' divorce. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Number 7, witnessing mom being physically abused? Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had anything thrown at her, or sometimes kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or something hard? Was she ever repeatedly hit over or a few times, or threatened with a knife or gun? And this could also include, was she hospitalized? Or did she ever have to go to the emergency room? Number 8, parent substance abuse. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, or who used street drugs? Number 9, family mental health. Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or ever attempt suicide? And number 10, incarceration. Did a household member ever go to prison? Quite heavy.
Yeah, but they're they're graphic, but they're graphic because they're explicit, so that they're concrete, so that they're yes or no answers there's not really a narrative or a story about it. It's just this happened or this doesn't happen.
Correct.
And I think that's important because a lot of us don't actually frame our, experiences so bluntly. And sometimes we have to be just profoundly related to what's so.
Well,
and I think this does that.
Very true, because some will say to me, well, no, I don't think I was sexually abused. And then we'll talk, and I don't want to trigger them or, cause flashbacks or more trauma. But I found that I really needed to be very specific in how I worded this, so that I wasn't causing too much trauma by even asking this question, but getting right, like you said, very concrete, right to the point.
Yeah.
So the other part is the scoring of this, which is what's important. So each trauma is 1 point. So 1 point for every trauma experienced. So I tally this up, and it's real important in our clinic. And I work in a clinic with a lot of chronically ill patients, a lot of autoimmune disease in particular. So we look at the fact that a score of 4 or more, there is a 70% chance of this child developing a chronic illness in adulthood. So sustained long-term stress, untreated, this child has a 70% chance of a chronic illness in adulthood.
Wow.
Very.
That's an amazing map. If
Yes.
What a predictor.
Yes.
What kind of health problems occur in adulthood? What are the kind of the big ones that you see?
Yeah. So it's really important to remember too, again, the higher the ACE score, the worse the adult outcome.
Gotcha.
So,
makes sense.
And what I mean by that is, again, that ACE score, and 4 kind of is that number that we see that really tilts the long-term physical symptoms. So an ACE score of 4 or more, the big ones that we see, twice as likely to become an alcoholic. With an ACE score of 4 or more, 6 times as likely to be diagnosed with cancer.
Ooh.
Yes, stress and cancer. Twice as likely to be diagnosed with heart disease. 4 times as likely to have a diagnosis with emphysema, and 12 times as likely to have a suicide attempt.
12 times.
Yes, yes. And, like you were saying, these are the big ones. This is the tip of the iceberg, Tim. I mean, this is just the beginning of all the chronic health problems that can occur.
Yeah.
But these are the highest percentages of the
Now, I imagine that, like any treatment, the earlier you treat something, the better your outcomes are going to be.
Of course.
But I'm also willing to guess that a lot of people come into your clinic as adults who, I know maybe it started with their own children with a diagnosis of something, and then suddenly it was like, oh, what about me? So while I can appreciate that it's important to address it like early on, can you do anything about an ACE score? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, as opposed to just being like, oh, I'm screwed,
Yeah.
So if you're over the age of 19, let's say, after, the neuroplasticity of the brain starts to really kind of, bottom out, is there hope?
Yes, there is hope. So I'm glad you asked that, and I want to talk about that because a lot of risky behaviors can occur because of adverse childhood effects that can lead to these chronic health problems, such as smoking, illegal drugs, excessive alcohol use. They self-medicate. They're trying to deal with this trauma. They don't have the resources or the tools. They just know something isn't right. They don't feel well. They might not even detect that yet, but they just know they need this to get through the day. So risky behaviors, a sure sign. What is important is to set the epigenetics by age 19. And what I mean by epigenetics is turning on the good genes, turning off the bad genes in every cell of the body. If we are able to set epigenetics by age 19, like you said, because of developmental reasons, if we can do this before age 19, they do not get the chronic health issues in adulthood.
Wow.
The gene expression changes. And so these ACEs severely impact the stress hormone that we call cortisol. So this is why we test also in the blood work, the lab work, the cortisol levels, and specific for cortisol is a saliva test that we do here. So we will check cortisol levels. If the cortisol gets stuck in that on position, which we know as fight or flight, the bear chasing you through the woods throughout your entire life, this leads these patients to be very hypervigilant, always looking, always a very startled response. So once they're stuck in the fight or flight, it is very hard. I have seen many patients who even have a hard time even knowing that they're stressed. I'll ask them about their stress, and they don't even sense fear or danger. They have lived this way for so long. But if we can get them in our clinic before age 19 or thereabouts, we can change that gene expression, turn off those bad cells, turn on those good cells. It makes a world of difference.
Nice.
As far as our treatment approach.
You and I, we have I don't know if it's a love-hate relationship. It's like a dynamic relationship with pharmacology. And how's that for?
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
Diplomatic. Okay. Is that good? Diplomatic, right? So, it's without going on the soapbox about the nation we live in and the economy we live in. Can medicine, sometimes I'm definitely pro pharmacology, but can pharmacology fix this problem?
So what I want to say before I started on that, because please, if I go down that rabbit hole, grab me.
That's what I'm saying. We both have to watch each other.
Yes. So I, of course, go to alternative treatment methods first. I look at guided meditation, music therapy, psychotherapy, acupuncture, biofeedback, EMDR, the list, visualization, yoga. I really prefer these type of treatment modalities. So then we ask the question of medication, because I do get asked this on a regular basis. So you starting out, that was my first thing to say was, I continue, and I've been doing this for 30 odd years, I continue to have a love-hate relationship with medication. So what can I say about this? So in the early 90s, I will start by saying in the early 90s, when the Prozacs and the Paxils came into our world of mental health professionals, oh my goodness, it was like, this is the answer. This is the answer. Because before that we had Thorazine, horrible, tranquilize you for hours and hours and days. We didn't have any good treatment options. So of course, when these things come out, everybody is singing its praises. And I too was doing that. From patients that I had as war veterans to trauma survivors, I was thrilled because their sleep improved. They had more control over their emotions. They were more involved in their daily lives. They were no longer a slave to their emotions. They could get back out into the world. They weren't being locked up in psychiatric hospitals because they had no way of stopping the flashbacks and the continual triggers. So medicine is helpful, and I still believe that today, in acute situations. So of course, I would much rather use a short-term stint on a medication, an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety, to help a war veteran get sleep and rest, rather than having him drink himself into a drunken stupor every night just so he can rest. Yes, I definitely, in that kind of, so I'm trying to give you the example of when I would be, yes, this is necessary.
And for the rest of us who aren't in acute care, what would be like, what's one favorite reliable complementary or alternative therapy that you prescribe that you've seen do wonders for people's stress?
Well, my go-to
Yes.
is guided meditation.
Okay.
I do guided meditation with my patients in my office daily. I have apps for the phone, free apps for your phone. So when we're not in a therapy session and you're at home and a trigger has occurred, being able to flip on this app.
What's your favorite app?
Oh, my favorite app. Well, Insight Timer.
Okay.
Is my favorite app. It has over 45,000 free guided meditations and specific headings, specific areas. So they address pain. There's today over 2,000 meditations on just pain, anxiety and stress, of course, pain, pain and healing. They also, so many of my patients use it for sleep. They have a whole area of over 5,000, I think it was around 5,200 today, just to help with different sleep guided meditations.
Brilliant.
So you can use this in concert with medication, but we eventually, when this, and we come in to therapy, to counseling, talk about the issues, we'll do another guided meditation here to really help them teach their brain to slow down, how they can teach their brain to slow down. But this is something that we have to work at. We can't just do it once and think it's over and it's done. And we have to keep at it every day, as your previous speaker was talking. I mean, this is a practice. It's something we have to keep working at.
Absolutely. It's like fitness, it's like a emotional fitness or a nervous system fitness. That's kind of I try to think of it that way, because if I go out and work out once, it's a transaction, but I know that is insufficient, right? Right. But yes, if I make it a practice, then that fitness level increases. And I've been using that as an analogy in my own life, because I feel like people understand that analogy. It's like mental hygiene,
Yes. And I even, I've had patients come in and say, well, I tried it, I did a 20-minute meditation, but I don't know, my mind wandered. I couldn't stick with it. It made me more anxious than it helped.
Totally.
So we have to go back and I actually start with 2 minutes twice a day. That I want them, we do a 1 to 2 minute meditation in my office, and then I ask them, and there is a filter on Insight Timer, another thing I love about that app, where you can search out just all of the meditations for 5 minutes or less. So You try 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes at bedtime. And then when our attention, we can focus for those 2 minutes, then we'll add a minute.
That's really smart. I really appreciate that, because so many meditation practices just start at a certain minimal time increment, and you're like, I can't. It would be like starting your workout. Like, you have to start running 5 miles the first time you run. You're going to die. I mean, you're not going to die, everybody.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? You're going to be miserable, and you're not going to want to go back and do it again. So I think that's a really smart way of building someone up to that.
No, it truly is. And so what I want to say too is, today, my big thing about medicine is I look at medicine as putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole.
Mm.
So
great phrase.
Meds help initially. Band-Aids may help initially with that bullet hole. It'll slow the bleeding down. It might do a few things to help with symptom relief. However, we need medications we think we need medications to help us with these symptoms that seem so stressful and so difficult to deal with. They just suppress our emotions. We have to deal with the underlying issue. You have to eventually deal with the bullet hole.
That's it. Well said. Really well said. Jody, this has been great. I know that we could all day, you and me, because we're definitely cut from the same cloth. Like I said, where can people find out more about you online?
A couple places. So my husband, I'm now part of all of this with my husband's his work with autoimmune disease and functional medicine. So I am at Dr. David Bilstrom .com. And then I'm also on the hospital's website, binghammemorial.org.
Okay.
So I have email set up there. Anybody can get in touch with me or get in contact.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Jody, thank you so much for being with us on the Stress Elimination Summit.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now you see why I wanted Jody to be part of this, because of the ACEs is so important for us all to understand that, our childhood experiences map our potentially with high probability a lot of our adult experiences in ways that we would not necessarily connect the dots. And it's not like anybody's fault. Like, it's just one of those pieces of knowledge that when you can apply it, now you can make sense out of behavior in the present that you might not be able to make sense out of. And we go through different levels of neural development, and when we're infants, the neuroplasticity in our brain is unmatched. We can, turn on, turn off things it's amazing what happens. The second level of that neural development is in adolescence. So we have a chance to really switch things around, literally, in the brain during adolescence. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about all of my work with Newport Academy, because we're working with kids who are anywhere from 13 to 17 in the academy, and then 18 to like 22 in the institute, where we can really undo a lot of that early trauma early on and make it less challenging later in life. Because I know I used the phrase bottomed out, and what I meant by that is neuroplasticity never ends, but there's degrees to which it ends, just like language aptitude and other things. So whatever we can do in our childhood, so much the better, right? So if we can't, great. Now we understand more about what's going on, and we can go back and heal that trauma now. So thank you for that, Jody, once again. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes, or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music and Recovery Self-Care Guide for healthcare professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.